Everybody's an hypocrite.
If you have a credit size of about 1 billion, 50% should go into housing. In the banks today, it's not like that.
Kodu is a great place to stay.
Lagos have that capital, Lagos have that money. They are not building as fast as the population is growing.
I don't think we have that money. The population of Lagos is around 20 million people. The population is expected to double in the next 10 years to about 40 million. An average household has about 4 people in the household. Said Lagos currently has a housing stock of about 1.5 million housing units. So it means that we have a deficit of about 3.5 million housing deficit.
200k per month gives you an annual income of about 3.6 million. On a salary of 3.6 million annually, I need to send my kids to school because they'll go to school. I need to, feed my family. How much of our annual income do we want to allocate to housing? The global standard is, around 30% or less. But 30% of 3.6 million is around 1.2 million. In some parts of Mushi, maybe. Yes, in places like Ibeju, I can get 2 bedroom for Tongote, all those areas, I can get a 2 bedroom for 1.2 million. This is one of the reasons why we did the Lagos residential market report. Do you see the Lagos housing market, moving towards the trend of monthly rentals?
I don't think I see it happening anytime soon.
So what are the operational risks surrounding the shortlet market?
Shortlets depends on people booking the shortlet. A bulk of short apartments in a particular building will outperform someone that operates shortlets singular apartment units in several places.
We were trying to book a villa in Cape Town. We made a request to get an apartment and they rejected the application. And the reason was because I'm not a frequent user of Airbnb.
That's the truth. Where do you invest in Nigeria as a private equity firm? But there are specific areas where we don't invest.
Welcome to the first episode of Market Intelligence, where we go beyond property sales to examine the data, the policies, investment trends, and the economic forces shaping the future of housing in Nigeria. Today, we are breaking down the Lagos residential market, the trends, investor behavior, the new tenancy law, and the future of housing in Nigeria. Right here, I have with me the fast-rising developers on the mainland, CEO and COO Edala Development. You're welcome, sirs. Could you please introduce yourself?
All right, my name is Dayo, Oloyede, co-founder and CEO at Edala Development.
My name is Samuel Olatunde, co-founder and COO at Edala.
You're welcome, sir. So let's get straight to the conversation. There's been a lot going on in the Nigerian real estate market, most especially Lagos. All right, Dayo, let's talk about the reality of Lagos housing market. Is Lagos currently building enough homes for its population growth?
Okay, outrightly, I would say no, and I will tell you why. So for me, I've been thinking about a couple of things because the population of Lagos is around 20 million people, and the population is expected to double in the next 10 years to about 40 million, right? And by the time we look at how many or what's the volume of housing we deliver in Lagos today, it's less than 100,000 housing units, right? And I look at it from the household point of view. An average household has about 4 people in the household. It means father, mother, 1 or 2 children, right? So if you look at our population, the last report I saw said Lagos currently has a housing stock of about 1.5 million housing units, right? So it means that if you have 20 million people, 20 million divided by 4, it means that you need to have at least 5 million housing units to be able to cater for the population averagely, right? And we have about 1.5 million housing units. So it means that we have a deficit of about 3.5 billion. So 3.5 million housing deficits, right? For me, when you look at, like I said, we produce less than 100,000 housing units every year, right? And if we need to get to 3.5 million housing units in the next 5 years, 10 years, we need to be producing at least 500,000 housing units every year, right? It's a lot of work to be done. And we are far from, the reality of actually solving the housing deficit generally. So that's basically what I think about that.
So, as a developer and someone currently operating in the business, if you want to give the government one advice or what they think they should do to curb this housing deficit, what would you say? Let's hear from someone.
I feel like first off, the government is doing the best it can do at this point in time. And when I try to look at the Lagos state government, because you're talking about Lagos, right, compared to other states, I feel like the government is trying its best, in all honesty, right? In the past 10 years, the government has come up with several initiatives, especially trying to deepen housing infrastructure and development in the states through several means. And the Lagos state government have also come up with several agencies that does different things while trying to also deepen, the development of housing. For example, we have the New Town Agency, right? Is a commission that's trying to open up new areas in the states. For example, the corridors of Ibejuleki are also experiencing and a lot of development, right? There are several corridors there that are being developed right now. So we have the likes of the Ayetoro, settlement. There's also one other one, Dayo, help me. See, there's also the Elerongbe that are also being developed, and government is also trying to encourage private people to play in these spaces. We have also seen the active development for LSPDC, right? You see this, you go around Lagos and you see all of this initiative that the government has done, but the truth is the government can't do it all alone. Right. We also see the direction of infrastructure in Lagos. And when we see infrastructure in Lagos, we just think it's normal. But the government is actually intentionally directing infrastructure to places where they want to open up. Look at the coastal road, for example, right? It's a federal government initiative, but the state government intentionally wants to start that coastal road at the point where it's starting, and the state government wants it to pass through a particular corridor. And what that does is it opens up that corridor. And one thing the state government is also trying to do is, incorporate a green rail along that structure, along the coastal road, so that it also eases transportation. And then when transportation is eased, right, people can move in between places, right? So but of course the government can't do it alone. That's where private sector operators, like developers like us, come in, right? What can we do? How can we build? But aside this, there are also several other factors that affect development. It is not just willingness to develop. There are also factors like the cost of finance, the cost of development itself, general market overview, inflation, and several other things. So even if you have the intention, you have a master plan and you even have the space allocated to you to develop 5,000 housing units every year, trust me, the capital now becomes a problem. Then you now start to have another level of conversation, which also poses challenges. So it is not a one shoe fits all conversation, but like I said, several factors affect it. But the truth is, the government is trying, and the intention to also expand and deepen, home ownership and availability in Lagos is there by the government.
Sorry, just to add to what already I said, I saw like a post from, I think, the Ministry of Housing in Lagos. They said last year they had a pipeline to deliver about 5,000 housing. So places like Badagry, Ibejuleki, and these are the areas that they can actually develop, right? Because for the government to do maybe housing units of about 500 housing units in a place like Bagada, it means you have to buy lands from the owners of the lands in this area, like in mass, right, to be able to do that kind of project, right? And I also I don't think, I think sometime last year in October, November, the Lagos State government issued a bond, right? Because when you speak about capital, I think the government are in the best position to be able to access some patient and very cheap capital. I saw the government were able to raise at some billions in terms of bond for the Lagos State. I think Lagos State is the first state to actually raise a government bond, right? So Lagos State is doing a lot of work, and I think that is only the reward for more work. It's the work for a job well done is more work, right? So I think Lagos State needs to do more in terms of assessing finance to be able to specifically for housing, for real estate. If the Lagos State government builds or had a pipeline to deliver about 5,000 housing units last year, it means that if they have access to more finance, patient capital like the pension fund, they can do maybe about 10,000, 20,000. So if the government alone is doing 20,000 and developers are doing maybe 80,000, realistically, it puts us in a better place, at least to solve the housing deficit generally.
Well, I actually have a different opinion because I feel like Lagos have that capital, Lagos have that money, but they are not building as fast as the population is growing. What can you say to that?
I don't think we have that money.
You don't think we have that money?
I don't think we have that money.
I don't think
You don't
the
think Lagos
government
State have
has.
that money?
I don't think they have the money. Is
The cost of governance alone. If you, by the time you look at their books and see how much they spend to run the administration, the cost of governance is actually high. right? It's defendable in some cases and it might not be defendable in some cases, right? But I think generally the government do not have a lot of money to be able to run, and that's why I see that there's a lot of initiatives to be able to tax people more, generate more revenue and all of that. But I think that the government can go all out into the capital market themselves, because the government is more credible. The government is a more low risk investment beneficiary, right? Right. So people can trust the government better, and the government can get cheaper cost of financing from the capital market or the general market generally.
All right, thank you very much. I recently saw something on the news that the average Nigerian find it difficult to raise about 75,000 naira within 7 days, and that brings me to my question.
The average Nigerian.
Yes, find it difficult to raise 75,000 naira within 7 days. So that brings me to my question. Let's say someone is earning about 200,000 naira a month. Where do you think is affordable for that person to live in Lagos with this current situation we're in?
Okay. I think you're right. The average Nigerian can raise 75,000 naira in 7 days because minimum wage is 70,000, and according to a report, I think that was released about 2 years ago, and last year or 2 years ago, only about, I think, 1 or 2% of Nigerians have more than 500,000 in their bank accounts, right? In a place where the population is 200 and some 250 million. So 1% of that is about, I think, 2.5 million people have more than. So yes, majority can raise that money, and that's true. So now talking about the conversation of where can you know someone that has 200k, that earns 200k per month, afford to stay, right? So 200k per month gives you an annual income of about 3.6 million, right? So it now depends whether you're a young person or you're family oriented. If you're family oriented, you're looking at bigger apartments. Maybe say you have a wife and you have two children. Sorry that I'm talking in the perspective of a man here, of course, because I'm a man, right? And that's how I would think. If I have a wife and two children, right, which of course I'm getting to that phase of my life, I want space, right? I want space, and I want to live in at least a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, right? So on a salary of 3.6 million annually, remember that housing is also not my major problem. I need to send my kids to school because they'll go to school. I need to, feed my family, right? And let's assume, okay, we're assuming that is a combined wealth of both the husband and the wife, which is the family, and that's how much you make in a month. How much of our annual income do we want to allocate to housing? The global standard is, around 30% or less. But 30% of 3.6 million is around 1.2 million, right? So where can 1.2 million naira get me in Lagos? And that's why this is one of the reasons why we did the Edala, Lagos residential market report. If you look at that report, you find out that the places where you can get a two-bedroom for 1.2 million naira, maybe not on the outskirts, but I don't also like when people refer to Ikorodu as your outskirts, but Ikorodu is a great place to stay.
Yes.
Ikorodu is a 1 hour drive from Yaba, or less, right? It's less than 1 hour. So to the point of government also trying to open up places. So I can get a two-bedroom in Ikorodu for 1.2 million naira. In some parts of Mushin, maybe, right? And the quality of the two-bedroom also matters as well. But in places like Egbeda, in places like Ibeju, I can get a two-bedroom for yes, in places like Ibeju, I can get a two-bedroom for Tongote, all those areas, I can get a two-bedroom for 1.2 million naira. But now the question is, that's for a family-oriented person. But if I'm young and I want to live closer to the city center, right, and I still have that 1.2 expendable to rent, I can afford a studio in Yaba, right, which also brings me closer to where it's happening, right? If I'm the sole earner of the 200k per month, right? So that's a reality. That's a reality. So which means family rented people, you can live closer to where it's happening, closer to the city centers.
That's serious. Do you have any other opinion, Dayo?
I think just in line with what you have said, even when you look at it globally, places like UK, US, at least over 80% of the population don't stay in city centers, right? They stay in the outskirts. I think that's where we are going to be getting to. Like I said, the government is trying to open new areas. The blue rail system, all of those things are opening new areas. So it means that as far as they can commute to work easily every day, it won't be a problem for somebody to be working in VI and be staying in Ibadan, or working in VI and be staying in Ikodu, working in VI and be staying in Badagry, working in VI and be staying in Ekpe, right? I think that's where we are heading to generally.
But I think there's a problem with that. Let's look at the new tenancy law. Now, before we know that landlords usually collect 2-year rent. And as at now, as we speak, some landlords still collect 2 years rent. So what exactly is the government doing to try to curb this? Imagine someone earning 3.6 million naira in a year and trying to pay his rent 2.4 million naira for 2 years. What is the future for that kind of family?
I think I'll say something, and I'll also allow Dayo say something. Yeah. And for the tenancy law, right, the best thing that the government can do is enact laws, right? If you have a landlord that is trying to, get rent in multiple years, and the new tenancy law says otherwise, then the landlord is committing a crime, basically. And then when a crime is being committed, you report. But in reality, right, in the reality of things, that's not obtainable, right? You are first of all, you're in dire need of a place to stay. Then you find a place. Then the landlord is saying, "Oh, I want to get 2 years rent," and in most cases, you're just about your business. You don't want to, go through the exactly. You don't want to go through the burden of, trying to now report a landlord and drag a case in which you just want a house, right? So that's not the reality of things. Yeah, so the government now needs to create a framework, maybe say a whistleblowing framework where people can independently, report these cases when it happens. And when it eventually happens, the government, takes it up. But, we are talking about, the practicability of things. And the truth is, some things are not just they're not practical, right? And, the government also incurs cost on all of these things. The government set up a law, and then the government has to, set up a team of maybe say 500, 1,000 people. The government is going to pay them. So who's going to enforce all of those things all across Lagos? The government is going to pay them. So the government also needs to look at the cost of their decisions before deciding to make a decision. So practically, it doesn't work. But we just hope that it gets to a point where people begin to see the importance of committing time to actually fight the cause. But the average Nigerian is all about himself, right? If I can't afford to rent it, well, let me leave this man to go. Because if I walk into a police station today to say I want to report a landlord for something, I will incur expenses. If I'm going to get a lawyer, I will incur legal expenses. Why do I want to incur legal expenses on an apartment that I have not rented? Because I want to drag a certain landlord that is trying to ask me for money to court. And the tenancy law also says something. It says, and I quote, if you are a landlord and you demand for 2 years rent, you are liable to an offense. And if you're a tenant and a landlord asks you for 2 years rent and you pay the 2 years rent, you are also liable. That's what the tenancy law says. So do I want to first pay the 2 years rent and go and drag my landlord to court? Or do I want to, go and report my landlord to court, start fighting the battle for somebody else? And one thing that is also a common practice is, tenants also sort of get blacklisted in the market. Right. I've seen it happen in places where, people know that, this person is problematic, agents already know you, in Lagos, people know people. And before you know it, this is the guy that, and then imagine you blow online about something. No landlord wants to give you their apartment to stay in. So these are the problems, and these are one of the issues. So I have a question, right? And the question is, a lot of people have had the opinion that the housing situation in Lagos is going to evolve, and it's going to evolve into certain scenarios where people start to pay monthly rent, right? So Dayo, what do you think the adoption is going to look like? And that I have also been able to compare. I mean, in this conversation, that has compared us with other economies.
UK,
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then when we look at these economies, a bulk of them practice monthly rent, right? So where do you see us Did you see Nigeria or Lagos, the Lagos market, any in that direction, or what do you think?
I don't think I see it happening anytime soon. And the reason is because, so structurally, for at least looking at the culture, we have not been used to monthly paying for things like rent and all of those things on a monthly basis, right? So for that to happen, I think it needs to take a lot of time. So at least, yes, policies can come in, people can start it and see how the adoption rate looks like. But I think that generally the market will be the one to determine whether you can do that in Lagos or not, right? And I also think that sometimes also one of the major hindrance of this adoption rate will also be the landlords, right? Most times the landowners or the landlords or the investors in real estate generally wants to get their money in lump sum, right? For example, if I buy a property in maybe Yaba for say 20 million naira, and my yearly rent on that property is about say 2 million naira every year. For me, if you're paying me 2 million every year in a month is about say 200K every month, right? For me, that I've invested 20 million there, it might not make sense to me to be collecting 200,000 every month, right? So I think the investors would be one of the major bottlenecks with that adoption. But I think from the users, I think it might make things easier a bit for the users because if you are able to save maybe about 3 months, 4 months rent, you can move to a location, right? And over the months, you get to now sort yourself out into that location, right? But I think that it requires a lot of players to be able to work together to ensure that happens. And specifically, the financial services industry also needs to be included because it now becomes a problem where a tenant is defaulting to pay rent, right? If everything is done structurally, right? For example, if somebody is not paying you rent, can the can there be a system where maybe the bank or the financial services industry, the partner, helps you
to pay.
get that money from that person, or the employer helps to remit that capital, that rent, right? But all of these things might not be easy as
It
as
might
it's
take a
been.
long
Yeah,
while.
it might take a long while.
Considering the situation of like Lagos.
And also, I also think that another reason why monthly rentals might not be ideal also is that if you do monthly rental, it's going to increase the cost of rent. If the rent in a year should be 2 million every year, if I want to do monthly rental, I would have to be charging at least 350K every month or 300K. And I'll tell you why.
Why?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because if I have 12 months, realistically, I would only be able to obtain about 8 months out of that 12 months because of the time it takes to evict one tenant and get somebody else into the apartment.
That's true.
Right? So if maybe people are leaving, maybe you have a high churn rates of tenants leaving your apartment. If in a year or in 24 months, if tenants are leaving your apartment every 2 to 3 months, right? It means that averagely you are having to lose about 6 months, 8 months in that timeline generally, and you have to make up for that as an investor.
Yeah, but are Gen Z even ready to pay monthly rent?
That I said, it's a cultural stuff, right? So it might not be this generation,
Because we have
maybe the next shortlets would obviously be very high. And also shortlets, most of the shortlets are fully furnished.
Yes.
Monthly rentals does not have to be fully furnished. It might be furnished in some sense, right? Maybe there's already bed, there is a wardrobe, there might not be TV, there might not be state-of-the-art finishing and furnishing in the apartment.
But let's try to practicalize it, right? So now let's assume there's an apartment. I mean, Yaba is a popular place. Let's assume there's an apartment in Yaba. Let's say it's a studio apartment. I own the apartment. I put in, the bed, the wardrobes, and there's the air condition. There's the water heaters is basic, right? And then right now the average annual rent in Yaba is around 1.2, 1.5 million,
For a
right?
studio apartment.
For a studio apartment. So how much will it make sense for me as a landlord to put out that apartment for rent in Yaba?
Okay, so this is my own rule of thumb. If the rents generally without furnishing is
Yeah.
about 1.2 million naira, and
Yeah,
the cost
1.2.
of the furnishing you have put into the apartment is about 2 million naira, For me, I would discount that furnishing over a
over
period
over a
of
period
3
of
years
time. Oh, okay.
or 4 years because depreciation is.
You also need to change
Yeah, I
those
also need to change.
things.
So if I say if the cost of furnishing is about 2 million naira, if I say 2 million divided by 3, which is about say 600
600
700k per year,
per year.
right? It means that I'll be putting that place out for like 2 million every year.
2 million every year for
For
a
a studio
studio
apartment that
apartment.
originally
Okay.
goes for 1.2 million
1.2.
naira.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you now I'm trying to I'm trying to look at the monthly landing cost. Right. So now if let's say we divide 2 million naira by 12 months, right? So that apartment lands on the tenants at 166,000 per month. But now, with your philosophy, you said that you also need to, because your investment in the property also needs to yield the annual return that you have anticipated, which means you also need to factor in the fact that you might have maybe downtime, you might have a tenant owe you for 1 month. So let's say you are able to obtain maybe 8 9 months rent to be able to meet up that 2 million naira target. So which means you are now going to charge way higher than 166,000 for the rent. So I'm trying to put up my calculator. I'm trying to see, what it looks like, right? So which means the landing cost of that apartment per month now goes to 230,000 per month. So now, who is the ideal person that can afford to pay 230,000 per month for rent?
Okay. So the ideal person by standard, which is what I also explained at the beginning of the session, which is if somebody is earning
200.
let's say somebody's earning 250k per or 300k per year, right? That means 3.6 million. 30% is 1.2 million, right? 1.2 million divided by 12 months, that's 100. So it means for you to be able to afford that 270, 250 million,
250,000 per
naira
month.
per
Average,
month,
yeah.
you should be earning at least say
500k.
500k. So 5 million per year.
I'm saying at least 500k per month.
500k per month, yes.
And the reason why I ask this question is, when you look at Yaba, there are certain places where they have these models where people pay rent per month, and they pay rent as high as this amount of money. And when you go to those ecosystems, you see that the people that normally would live in those places are people in tech, people that like to work from home, right? Because why will I be paying that amount of money per month and I will have to leave my house, right? So maybe people that their house is their office, basically. So it just works for them, right? And most of the time, I have also seen organized apartments where they also sort of try to provide infrastructures that also makes the place comfortable for people. So say the likes of internet access, maybe say a community that also makes it make sense for tenants who want to stay in these places. And but the truth is, this is reality, right? While I see some people practice monthly rentals, right, but what comes to my head is it is still secluded to a certain set of people, and then monthly rental right now is designed to be affordable, but structurally it can't be
It
affordable.
can be affordable, yeah.
Even if we decide to go through the route of monthly rentals, it can't be affordable.
I don't think I want to be monthly rentals as well.
You don't think you want to pay monthly rents? Exactly. So that's it. So the first factor, like that I mentioned, is a cultural shift needs to happen, right? And then secondly, it needs to work for the purpose in which it was built for, affordability, and both can happen anytime soon.
All right, Dayo. So you talked about the government providing about 5,000 units last year, and for me, I don't know anyone in the government, and I'm not seeing one. So that leads me to my question: is the private sector carrying more of the responsibility, and is that the reason for rent hike in Lagos?
Yeah, I think logically, the private sector delivers more housing than the government. I don't think that is news, right? So if the government is delivering about 5,000, it means the private sector is probably delivering about 40,000 housing units, right? So and the private sector, like we know, is investors driven. Investors give them money. They don't have access to patient capital. The interest rate is very high. Banks will specifically tell you they're not doing real estate investments. So it means you have to go and find very high alternatives to be able to finance your projects, right? Now, by the time you get those financing to be able to finance your project, it means you're also selling to people once you finance that development, because as a developer, profitability to you is not in cash flow over the years, it's in selling, right? So now when you sell, The people that are buying from me also are coming up with an investment mindset. When those people buy, they also want to get returns, right? And sometimes I laugh because people say it doesn't make sense to invest in Nigeria. But the same people come back and say the rent is high, right? So if you are telling me if I buy a property for 20 million, it will take me 20 years to make my returns back, right? And you are saying it doesn't make sense. Now, when I try to increase that returns for it to make sense for an average investor, the alternative or the results of that effect or the effect of that increase now becomes to the people that are renting the apartment. So I think it's a trickle down effect. The more investment, the more aggressive, the more high interest rates investment that we get as developers, the higher the rents.
So is that why people now prefer shortlet as the go-to medium to quickly earn back return on the investment on their real estate?
The Lagos residential market is not as profitable as the shortlet business.
Yes, it is. That's reality. If you buy any property in Lagos, it takes you at least 20 years to make your capital back. If you buy a shortlet apartment in Lagos, it takes you about 8 years to make your capital back. That's if you do your management well, your marketing well. Maybe if you buy with a property or a company that's built specifically for shortlet and helps you manage, like what we do at Edala, right? So you make your money back in 8 years, right? But that's only when you do that. But if you buy for the purpose of just doing rentals, it takes you about 20 years.
So what do you think, Summer?
So I think that capital flows to places where you can generate maximum returns, and you can't blame people that have money when they say, oh, they're not trying to solve the housing deficit. The average person that has capital wants to make money on make more money than wants to make more money with their money, and they're not interested in solving the housing deficit. So that's why we see a lot of money going into prime developments. And right now, I even think it's a fallacy to build anything affordably. I'll give you an example from the perspective of a developer. Right, I'm a developer in Lagos, and I'll tell you for a fact that it costs me the same amount of money to build in Ibadan and to build in Lagos. Right, taking out the cost of land. Right, so if it costs me the same amount of money, and I know that I can get a higher economic value in Lagos, I will prefer to build in Lagos, and that's the truth. Right, that's the truth from the lens of a developer. So, and that's why we see a lot of people going into places and trying to maybe say build affordably, but the truth is affordability right now is a fallacy. We're trying to work on a model to even discover how to build affordably, right? Me and that we were talking, we're having a chat on Instagram the other day. We're trying to explore alternative ways to build such that the landing cost of the building that we are constructing drops when it gets to the client, because of course when the landing cost drops, expectations for returns also drops, which now means the people that are going to use the apartment get to pay less, and that's how it works. Honestly. And like I said, it first off, it takes a willing person to want to build, but of course the economy and other factors need to align for it to work and also be affordable to the end user.
All right, Samuel, I complete that rent is high, and let's assume I want to build my own apartment and I set it on a high rate. Don't you think I am an hypocrite?
Well, everybody's an hypocrite. That's the truth.
In the real estate market,
Everybody is, right. But capital is king, like I would say. Right. If I have 100 million today and I put it into real estate investments, right, I put it into real estate investments while thinking of the alternative investment for my 100 million. So everybody's an hypocrite online. But when it comes to the actual capital works, even the private equity firms, even the banks, even the financial institutions are selective about where they put money, and everybody puts money where they generate maximum returns. And like I said, nobody wants to be the messiah. Nobody, even the international organizations, even the foreign direct investments that are coming into Nigeria, they want to go to places where they can get maximum returns and lower risk. I'll give you an example. I was watching Danladi Danladi is the partner, Verod. Yeah. I was watching and it was on a panel recently, and he specifically said something. He was asked a question around where do you invest in Nigeria as a private equity firm, and he said they invest in a certain they invest in diverse areas, but there are specific areas where we don't invest, right? And the number one place he mentioned was real estate. He said they don't invest in real estate. So if the people that have the big money prefer not to invest in real estate because of certain things that they think doesn't make sense to them. So the people that are, the hypocrites or the people gullible enough to I don't no, maybe not gullible, people that have low access to capital and are investing in real estate, they would demand higher premium. Right? If there's a lot of capital more than required being pumped into real estate, the cost of capital reduces, and that's how it works. Demand and supply. But because there's limited capital, I'll give an example. That also knows for the major part of last year, we raised a lot of money, and we raised money at significantly higher rate than what the bank would give us. And it's because for some banks that we were talking to, they just saw real estate as high risk, right? And that's the truth. And I mean, even for the average investor with us, right, still sees real estate as high risk. But what makes up for the risk is the high return that they get. So they ask for higher returns on their investment. So that's how it works. So for the person buying the apartment, who is the end user, the person, of course, the what incentivizes him to buy that property is basically how much he can earn, right, from investing. So you really can't blame people. And the truth is, that's why I said everybody's an hypocrite. People complain of high rent where they live, but when they invest in real estate, right, I have never seen, I think it has only happened once, where a landlord specifically said, this amount of money that we are charging for rent was too much. I think it was only one person. But in all my years of real estate practice, I've never seen someone say no to rent increase. Sometimes I've even seen a case where someone buys an apartment from me this year, I rent it out for you this year. In the next year, you're telling me you want to increase your rent by 40-50%. I'm like, bro, it is human beings that are paying this rent. And I can't because I'm a property manager, it's impossible for me to bring myself to go and demand for 40-50% increase on a rent after someone has lived there for 1 year. It's impossible. And I have to explain to the client. But the truth is, some clients they don't care, and they will yank you off the management. And that's the truth. So, like I said, everybody's an hypocrite.
Yeah. So just to add to what you said, so we manage over 100 apartments for our client that have bought properties from us over the past couple of years. And like Cardi has said, when customers come and say, "Oh, I want to review my rents," right? They come at somebody can be charging 1 million and say he wants to increase his rent to 2.5. I've seen that happen. I have to go back and try to manage the expectation with the investor and say, "Sir, I think this is too much. Can we do 1.5?" Just to be able to reduce that rental value so that it also makes sense to the person that is paying. Either they are renewing or you are getting somebody else to pay, right? So I think it's only once or twice that we have seen somebody that said, we even went to the person and said, "I think you should review your rent," and the person said, "No, you know what, I'm not interested, just leave it like that." So it's very, very few people generally. So if you're managing 100 apartment and just 1 or 2 people are the ones that are actually saying are the ones that are actually showing mercy, right? And I don't blame people that want to review their rent upwardly, right? As the economy as things keep going up in the economy. However, kudos to the government. We saw like very stable economy and some reduction in terms of economic indicators like inflation, interest rates, exchange rates, and all of those things last year. But at least the years before last year, when we saw cement move from 3,500 to 10,000 naira, some clients were telling you that I have to increase my rent from 1 million to 3 million naira.
Yes.
Like we saw that, right? So you can't blame them because also for them, their cost of living has also doubled or in some cases tripled. So they have to make up for that high cost of living from their investment generally. So yeah.
So it's safe to say that the investors are currently the highest beneficiaries in the Lagos housing system.
Yeah, I would say categorically yes. And the reason why I say that is because the investment generally, without investors, we won't have the kind of housing supply we have in Lagos, right? So you can imagine if government is only able to deliver about 5,000 housing units, right? And the developers are doing about 35,000 housing units generally, right? And for me, if you don't incentivize those investors enough, it means in the coming years, you won't have that investment inflow into the real estate ecosystem, right? And if we want to solve the housing deficit, we're saying we need to, go 5x, 10x on the current housing supply that we currently have, right? You need more investors to come into the ecosystem and invest more, right? Generally, by the time we look at all of the volume of investment that comes into Nigeria, either from FDI or FPIs into the Nigerian investment landscape generally, I think the volume that goes into real estate is just about 10%, right? And for me, if you are talking about solving the uncertainty, that's very, very low, right? So, and like I already have said, for investors, they don't think that the market is able to give them what they are looking for, right? So the little investors we have, we are telling them that the rent is high, right? So how do you expect more investors to come in if the investment is not looking, or the returns is not looking as attractive as it should be for them generally? So I think that if we want to solve this problem, we need more investors. We need that 10% that is going into other investment classes. And I'll tell you why I think that way. For countries, serious countries that were able to solve their housing deficits, right? They had an agenda to solve housing deficits and invested all of their investment into housing, right? They channeled the investment and said, for the next 5 years, all of our investment is going to housing, right? Or bulk majority of our investment is going to housing, right? So they instructed in the financial institution and said, oh, if you have a credit size of about 1 billion, maybe 50% should go into housing. But in the banks today, it's not like that. Maybe about 10%, 20% of their loan book and their entire loan book is going into real estate, right? So we need to increase that volume of investment that is coming into real estate to be able to solve this problem generally.
All right, so we'll be able to identify the residential market and the risks surrounding it. So let's move into the shortlet market. I want us to talk about the operational risks, because I saw something online recently on, I'm going to cite an example, the Banana Island, where the shortlet market was clamped down. So what are the operational risks? Because everyone believes the shortlet market is very lucrative, and I believe it doesn't end there. So what are the operational risks surrounding the shortlet market?
Shortlets depends on people booking the shortlets, and I want to break it down. And people booking the shortlets also has a lot of factors that need to go in for that to happen. For example, if I set up an apartment, maybe say 3 bedroom apartment in my area today, people don't automatically just discover the shortlet. There's a lot of things that go into it. I have to make a lot of noise about my shortlets. I have to distribute my shortlet to agents that are that give out shortlets. So that is in one perspective. I also need to consider that I am competing with several other people, right? And looking at the reports that we released in 2025, early 2025, that talked about the shortlet market in Lagos alone, we have, I think, over 6,000 active shortlet apartments as at December 2026. And that's what our 2020, and sorry, as of December 2024, right? And that was what our data was able to capture. In Lekki phase 1 alone, we have over 2,000 shortlet apartments in that axis, in that corridor. No, sorry, Lekki phase 2. In Lekki phase 1, we have about 1,600 in that corridor as at that point in time. In some other areas in Lagos, maybe not a lot. In Yaba, our data was able to capture around 200. In some other places, maybe lesser than that. So which means if I'm looking at investing in shortlets, I need to ensure that the market that I have decided to operate in, I need to have a competitive advantage. And the strategy is simple, and what I'm going to share when it comes to shortlet market is someone that operates a chain of shortlets, or a couple a bulk of shortlet apartments in a particular building, will outperform someone that operates shortlets singular apartment units in several places by economies of scale. That one is standard, right? If I have a block of apartments and I have 15 apartments there, and I'm running all 15 apartments for shortlet, yes, there's more rooms to fill, right? But by margin of operational costs, I'm going to outperform the person that has 15 shortlet apartments scattered around Lagos. And that's the truth. So shortlet now needs to evolve into organized management. So how do we band the shortlet together, right? Also talking about operational risk. Now let's assume I have an apartment, or I have maybe say 3 apartments in a block of 20 flats where people live there. before you know it, people that live in these places, will get uncomfortable by the activities of the shortlet, because in shortlet business, you can also do, there's only so much you can do to profile your guests, and do some other things. But when guests come into the apartment, they can also pose as an inconvenience to the people that live in those places. So that's why, me personally, my philosophy is, to make the best out of your shortlet, you need to operate it away from where people live, right? And if it's in an estate, the estate needs to understand that yes, there's shortlet here, and everybody knows, and is a popular opinion that shortlet is here to stay, right? If not, at the slightest of inconvenience, it is the shortlet people. At the slightest of theft, it is the shortlet people, and that's the truth, right? So people always use shortlet as the shortlet takes the fall for every bad economic activities. But yes, we understand that the business is high risk, right? And that's what it's designed for. It's designed for people that want to live the fast, maybe a lot of people that want to live the fast life, people that are traveling. So it is bound to attract a lot of operational risk. But for us, for example, at Edala, part of the things that we do is, first of all, we build and we design our buildings for shortlets, for the ones that are for shortlet. So we know from the beginning that everybody living here are coming here as shortlet of takers, and we tell our investors, if you want to buy to live, right, I can sell to you, I can decide to, but it is in your best interest not to buy to live in, because when the wahala starts, 15 people are running shortlet, only you are living there. Someone comes into the apartment, of course we have a no smoking policy, and the person decides to flout the no smoking policy, and then the person smokes, and maybe you have kids in your apartment and you are inconvenienced, right? It's not a good experience for an homeowner. So that's why is best for you to also live in a place where is heavily residential. But if you, as an investor, you're trying to buy an apartment to live in, I would advise you not to buy in a place where it is also heavily shortlet based. And these markets are intertwined. We have seen a lot of shortlet operators wanting to go into very exclusive areas, because exclusivity as well also attaches a premium. Attaches a premium to the value of shortlet. So that's why you see shortlet in areas like Banana Island, feels exclusive, right? For example, there are certain estates that you can't even enter. They don't allow shortlet. But if a shortlet operator enters into that particular space, people feel a sense of security, and you can't blame them. And the reason why there's an heightened sense of what's the word now heightened need of exclusivity in shortlet, because shortlet is now getting a lot of people are taking advantage of it. Personally, for me, if I'm a shortlet user, I prefer to take apartments that are in exclusive areas, and the reason is because I don't want to take short apartments in places where people come around, and I'm starting to see funny faces. There's a lot of people around doing funny stuff, right? I guess what those funny stuff are. And for my audience, I may not be the bulk majority of the shortlets user, but there's a certain metric I like the short apartments I want to take to meet. And that's why you see a lot of shortlet operators trying to move into spaces that makes the apartment feel exclusive. You can't blame them. But the truth is, these operators also need to understand the risk of moving into those exclusive spaces, and also the potential risk it poses to the residents. And like I said, the best thing to do is have an organized engagement and arrangement with the security operatives where you operate. Yes, I run shortlet here. Yes, what's your modus operandi? This is my modus operandi. If people move this way, I need you to do this, and clamp down on this, right? Like I said, so there's a lot of risk in shortlet, but yes, sometimes or oftentimes the return outweighs the risk. But we must be innovative enough to ensure that we don't put people in harm's way through the course of the operations of.
You said it all. What do you have to say there?
I'll just add something. In addition to what he has said, I think the major thing to also look at is the shortlet managers or the shortlet owners need to tighten their security in terms of checking and doing a due diligence on their guests. However, it also poses another risk because the market is very competitive. The time you are using to do a background check on your guests, if you're not attending to the person well, somebody else has collected that money, right? So I was trying to book an apartment because some of my guys were trying to go for vacation in South Africa, and we were trying to book a villa in Cape Town, right? And we applied, like we made a request to get an apartment, and they rejected the application. And the reason was because I'm not a frequent user of Airbnb, so they couldn't verify my identity, right? So you can see from that shortlet owner's point of view, I'm not taking any other guests, right? So if that begins to happen, at least with all of the major shortlet owners or managers, if they begin to reject some applications, for example, if you're coming to book an apartment, if I can't get your ID card, all of those basic, at least at the bare minimum, to be able to identify the person that is coming to book the apartment. Because I think the government is doing a great job with trying to harmonize the major forms of identity from the NIN to the BVM, right? So if you're able to access somebody's ID card, you're confirming that person's booking, anything that happens from that value chain, you can trace and track that person. So I think that needs to happen for securities also to be on the on 100% for shortlet generally.
Yeah. But don't you think that is quite expensive to operate?
Yes, it can be, and that's where the combined or structurally managed shortlet players would do well, because you have that team advantage to play around, because you can employ somebody for just due diligence, right? Or you can employ somebody for just bookings. So that person, before you accept any booking, you must collect that person's NIN or ID card, and small ways to be able to just verify the identity of the person that is booking, right? So at the point of the person checking in, you also want to be sure that the person that booked is the one that is using the apartment, because I can use my brother's, or I can use a random NIN to book an apartment and not be the one to actually use that property, right? So the structural or
I want to share a perspective. So this one happened, close to somebody I know. So there was a particular guy, he booked a shortlet apartment with someone. So I think he actually he invited some girls over. I think there were about 3 girls. He booked a shortlet apartment. It was one that booked. I think he used the identity, a fake identity or one of the identity of those girls, right, to book a shortlet apartment. So they all came around, and after they all came around, I don't know how the guy absconded with all of the phones and belongings of those girls, and he left the apartment. So now the girls who came to an apartment thinking they want to have a good time with the guy, right, all of a sudden they can't find their belongings and they can't find the guy. And of course, they reached out to the shortlet managers and said, oh, this guy, and the shortlet managers tried to perform due diligence, and they discovered that the identity of the guy was fake, right? This just I'm just trying to show you, this risk is not limited to other users. It's limited to the shortlet apartment itself. It's not limited to the shortlet apartment itself. It's also, it spreads to the valuables of the apartment. So imagine maybe you have valuables inside your apartment, or someone comes into your apartment, the person damages items worth more than what the person has paid for booking, and the person leaves, right? How do you verify all of those things? So security is an important factor. And also, I think I want this medium to also charge people that book shortlets. Please, please, use the shortlets the way you would use your personal house. Because it is a shortlet doesn't mean you have paid for it for a day. Yes, right, you have paid for it for multiple days. And one thing I discover about people that use shortlet is, see those people that book 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they are not problematic. But you see those people that book one day, they will come, you book a day, you come in with a lot of people, you spoil chairs, you damage a lot of things that will now have to spend hundreds of thousands to fix it. It's really not fair. And I think that's why the person, the people in South Africa, that's why they will reject you, because of course I need to verify that this person won't come and damage my items, because I would rather say no to your booking than spend much more than you have paid to fix things.
All right, we've looked at the Lagos residential market, we looked at the shortlet market, we talked about affordability and the housing sector in Nigeria. So this is my last question. If nothing changes, where can the average Lagosian realistically live in the next 10 years?
So I think if nothing changes in the next 10 years, if we don't begin to increase at least times 5 to times 7 our current housing supply in the next 10 years, the average person that lives in Lagos currently today will be living in Ogun State,
You'll
Ibadan.
be forced to push out.
Yeah, so I think that's the major line of activity that can happen.
And then, of course, Lagos will now be reserved for people that can afford it. Because one thing that is common is, a lot of people say that, there's a housing bubble in Lagos, but I don't see any bubble. What I see is a premium on the supply gap. It's that simple. So when there's a supply gap, so the premium that comes from it is, what the investors take advantage of, and that's what's in the market, right? So
All right. I also believe that in the next few years, almost the average Lagos shall will be pushed out. We will be forced to live in places like Ogun State, Mowe, and the likes.
So I agree with you, which is why I said that, in the next couple of years, in fact, it's a spillover market opportunity for places like Ibadan, Ogun State, if the government take advantage of that understanding, right? And I think Ibadan is doing a great job. I think the Oyo State government is doing a great job to actually invest in infrastructure and ensure that developers are coming to invest into the real estate development space there. Well, the ease of doing business there is actually on the high side, right? So if things like that happen in the next 10 years, you see a lot of people moving, and it also creates a good market demand for those states.
Thank you very much. And we've come to the end of Market Intelligence Podcast. We'll be able to look at the Lagos residential housing sector and the shortlet market as well. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notification bell whenever we drop a new episode. Like and comment your thoughts on this episode. See you on the next one. Bye.